And apparently what's going on, according to this report, is BlackRock and others are buying up whole neighborhoods. These builders build these homes, and it's called build to rent. They're never going really on the market other than right to a BlackRock type cup. He buys up a whole neighborhood. And I think it fits with the idea that it's largely we're going to become a nation of renters. Are you familiar with this? Got 30-second closing coming.
Absolutely. That goes right along with what the World Economic Forum said. You will own nothing. You get to rent everything, you little serf. So, folks, we've got to resist. We've got to do it now.
Got to resist. All right, libertysentinel.org, right? Or is it the Liberty Sentinel?
Yep. LibertySentinel.org, ClassicalConversations.com, thenewamerican.com. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you. LibertySentinel.org, and he'll be with us as a keynote speaker Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Full details, worldviewstore.com. All right, we're going to get into some of this tonight. Debt-based capitalism is over, gives way to asset-based system. Very fascinating, is it not? Patrick Wood on that tonight. Robert Spencer tonight. I don't know who else I got. Oh, I think I've got a commander, a former Navy commander joining me tonight. Lots going on tonight, 7:30 Central, Brandon House Live. Take care.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
MacArthur moved to his next great role aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Here on the morning of September 2nd, the drama of surrender reached its climax. In a ceremony that lasted only 20 minutes, the fate of Japan was sealed forever. The 11-man Japanese delegation was photographed by cameramen, perched at every vantage point to record the momentous event for posterity. The stage was set. General MacArthur walked from a cabin to open the surrender ceremonies.
We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
On behalf of Emperor Hirohito, Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed for the Japanese government. Japan accepted unconditional surrender according to the provisions of the Potsdam Declaration. Stood at attention behind MacArthur as he began to write his name with the first of 5 pens.
These proceedings are closed.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, the quest for peace. Can we prevent another world war? On this day, as you just saw and witnessed again in 1945, the surrender of the Empire of Japan in World War II was finalized by Emperor Hirohito when he sent his representatives to Tokyo Bay to sign the formal instruments of surrender on September 2nd, 1945, on board the USS Missouri battleship, bringing the war's hostilities to a close. Well, looking back on all that has transpired since then, we find ourselves, folks, once again, facing a complex economic and international security environment. The institutions of the post-World War II liberal world order that defeated Soviet communism are in tatters, while new institutions are being created by America's adversaries and our friends together. That's right, I said that. The BRICS effort to reduce the economic power of the U.S. and remove the dollar as the reserve currency for the world and the West was only the beginning. This week, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, is meeting in China, led by China's Xi, Russia's Putin, and India's Modi. Even NATO member Turkey is attending and asking for membership. The SCO's leaders are calling for a new method of global governance and a move toward a more multipolar world. You ever heard that before? President Trump's peace efforts in Ukraine hinge on successful economic and trade deals with many of these countries, while at the same time Putin is intransigent on peace, generating increasing calls from so-called Western experts for stronger responses to pressure and more. Well, my guest today to discuss all this is National Security Strategist David Pine. David's a former U.S. Army Combat Arms and Headquarters Staff Officer. He oversaw a whole lot of things, including the armaments cooperation with the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas from 2000 to 2003. He currently serves as the president of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. David, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Hey, Rob, it's a pleasure to be back with you today.
Well, it is the anniversary, so I had to show the surrender. But what's behind that short video clip, which was very shortened and edited, folks, go watch the whole thing. It's much more dramatic. General MacArthur was very good at drama than what that little clip leads you to believe. But what led us into World War II, David, that's similar to what we are seeing today? I have a gut feeling that it's very similar.
It's extremely similar. I've written about this for the last 3 years. Hitler, obviously, he was a mass murderer, became a genocidal monster, but he was trying to reunite Germany with the Polish border and the German city of Danzig that was under Polish control. That was 4.3% of Poland's territory at the time. Britain decided to put their foot down with Neville Chamberlain's, guarantee of Poland, which was ill-considered because Britain had no ability to put a single battalion on the ground in Poland, unlike the situation in Ukraine, where we could, literally put several divisions in Ukraine from the U.S. There was no real land border that Britain could use to reinforce them. And, Hitler actually even said he was willing to have an armistice 2 days after he invaded that would allow him to keep those, again, that 4.3% of former German territory that belonged to Poland at the time. And with Putin, he was with Ukraine, it was very similar. He was asking for a little more of the Donbass, or at least neutrality outside of Ukraine, partial Ukrainian disarmament, and then just like Hitler, days after he invaded, he also asked for an armistice. He asked for the Istanbul Agreement, which was initialed by the Ukrainian delegation, largely written by the Ukrainian delegation, mere weeks after Russia invaded. And under that agreement, Russia had agreed to withdraw from all Ukraine's pre-war territory. So that would, you would consider that to be perhaps a triumph on the Western side, but Joe Biden and, of course, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson decided to veto that. And I don't think Zelensky was favorably disposed to sign it either once Putin had unilaterally withdrawn from 30% of Russian-controlled territory in the three northern oblasts of Ukraine, including Kyiv Oblast, where he had Russian forces. Many people forget, had the Ukrainian capital partially surrounded mere days after the Russian blitzkrieg began.
Yeah, they had some forces operating inside the capital, didn't they? If I remember correctly. I mean, it wasn't major forces, but they were doing some special operations raids and those kind of things, weren't they?
Well, they were, Russian armored columns were within 10 miles of Ukraine, of Kyiv's city center. So they were literally on the outskirts of Kyiv city. They were well within Kyiv Oblast. They had it surrounded from two different directions on both sides of the Dnipro River.
Yeah. So at the time, in pre-World War II, that all this was happening between the UK, Germany, Poland, and the rest of Europe, what was happening in Asia?
Yeah, so there was the Second Sino-Japanese War that began, I think it was in 1937. Of course, there was a previous one, I think it was in 1895. That was Japan won that one, of course. And then with that war, Japan had been trying to end it, but on terms, I guess, the Chinese nationalists, rightly considered unacceptable. And so that war dragged on and it kind of merged into what became the Pacific War between the U.S. and Japan. But one of the interesting things about Pearl Harbor, of course, that you're likely aware of as well, is that that was really a 14-month campaign by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then President of the United States, to try to provoke Japan, the Japanese Empire, to attack the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor as a backdoor to war against Germany. And there was a very detailed intelligence operation that essentially leaked what was then known as Rainbow 5, which is the U.S. war plan to send an American expeditionary force of 5 million troops into Nazi-occupied France. And that was leaked in the press, and Hitler heard of it, and that's what caused him to declare war on the U.S. after literally, 2 years of doing everything in his power to avert war with the U.S.
Yeah, and what were the economics of the Japanese initiating combat action against the U.S. in the Pacific?
Yeah, as you well know, FDR had implemented two different oil embargoes. One was a partial oil embargo, and that didn't seem to have the desired effect of getting Japan to attack us. But then he did, I think it was July 30th or August 1st of 1941, a full-scale U.S. oil embargo. And that was a trilateral embargo, including the UK and Dutch Empire, which included Indonesia. And that really strangled Japan. They had about a year's supply, I think, of oil for the Japanese fleet and empire. And that was really the trigger, that caused them to seek negotiations. And a lot of people don't realize is they made some pretty good offers, peace offers, before Pearl Harbor that were rejected by FDR. And that included Japanese military withdrawal from both Indochina and, according to my sources, much of South China as well, excluding Hainan Island.
And eventually, weren't the Chinese allies of the United States, similar to what the Soviet Union became allies to the United States in that war?
Yeah. China was fought gallantly under nationalist China. The communist China sat the war out. Essentially, the Mao's Red Army essentially took the position that they would not fight the Japanese army. They were hoping that the war between the Japanese and nationalist Chinese army, which was then called the National Revolutionary Army, would succeed in gravely weakening the NRA, enabling communist Chinese forces to conquer more nationalist controlled territory at the end. And the communists back then were very weak in terms of the amount of territory they controlled. The nationalists really were the predominant military force within modern day mainland China.
But during all this, didn't the United States FDR was pretty smart, like with the Lend-Lease program in the Atlantic. He sent a civilian fighter unit, the Air Force, into China. And I think they worked with both the nationalists and the communists out in the wilderness. They were building runways and flying the Flying Tigers fighter aircraft. Is that right? Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah, we had, I think it was modern, P-40 fighters on the Flying Tigers, squadrons, and those worked, with both the Chinese nationalists and the communist Chinese to fight Japan. So, FDR was kind of waging undeclared proxy wars, much like Biden and Trump are today against our enemies. We were fighting we had a volunteer force fighting China or fighting Japan in China. And then, of course, we were fighting the Atlantic War, depth charging German U-boats in support of Great Britain.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest difference with today is now, the liberal world order that was created after World War II, led by the United States, and eventually stood up against Soviet Union when they completely turned their backs on us and decided they were going to be an aggressive expansionist empire too after World War II. But eventually that world order stood Soviet communism down, and now we have Russia, still the Communist Chinese Party in control of mainland China. Taiwan still exists, supposedly controlled by nationalist Chinese. I'm not quite sure how much in control they are, because a lot of CCP assets are over there. And we have India, who is a major power in the region for sure, and a lot of discussion about oil again. And we're going to talk about that some more after this break with David Pine, national security strategist, former U.S. Army planner, supervised weapons cooperation agreements at the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, the continent of Africa. Really understands the geopolitical space we find ourselves in right now. We'll be right back. It's Training Tuesday, and we're celebrating the end of World War II.
The businessman from Texas that spent years trying to bring the perfect red heifers to Israel is coming to speak in Collierville, Tennessee, outside of Memphis, on Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. They now have sacrificed one of those red heifers. There it is burning. They've now gained 10 gallons of ashes. Why do they need this? Well, the Old Testament, Numbers chapter 19, says that for the purification ceremony, for their temporary tabernacle or full-time temple, they need the ashes of a perfect red heifer. This is the first time this has happened in over 2,000 years. The story is going global. It's highly controversial. In fact, there's even a connection between the attacks on Israel on October 7th and these 5 red heifers. Come and hear him speak live in person, Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Full details, worldviewstore.com, and to get your tickets, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com.
Let's take Mr. Navarro at his word and consider his perspective that India should not buy oil from Russia because it hurts Ukraine. But then why would you single out India? Why not go after Germany or France or the rest of Europe? They're still buying oil from Russia. Sure, it's going through India, but they're still buying Russian oil. And how can you ask those countries to sanction India when they're actually getting their oil and gas from India as well that comes from Russia? But wait, if you think for 1 minute that that's very hypocritical, then get ready for this. You know who else is helping Russia by buying Russia's oil, even though they're getting it after it's refined through India? This is going to blow your mind. It blew my mind when I started reading this. Are you ready? Take a look at this headline. Take a look at this headline. There it is. The headline that makes everything that Peter Navarro says seem incredibly stupid. Does he know this? Let me read you what's in this article, and hopefully maybe you'll pass this along to Mr. Navarro. Quote, according to the Ukrainian oil market analysts, India supplied 15.5% of Ukraine's total diesel imports in July 2025. That's more than they get from any other country. Ukraine is getting its oil from Russia to fight a war with Russia. What? They average 2,700 tons of it. It makes July, interestingly enough, one of India's strongest export months this year to Ukraine. How rich is this? I mean, what? Is Mr. Navarro now going to sanction Ukraine for getting Russian oil as well? Why not? It's as crazy as everything else.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday. My guest today is former U.S. Army officer and strategist David Pine. And we're discussing the end of World War II, which its anniversary is today, the anniversary of the signing of the surrender agreement from the Empire of Japan with the rest of the world, which included China and Russia that were all represented on that ship, I believe, the USS Missouri. But more importantly, discussing the geopolitical and economic situation that led up to World War II is very similar, not quite exact, but very similar in context to where we're at now. David, that was Rick Sanchez. And folks, he was on Russia Today. You can see the logo. I didn't cover it up in the top right-hand screen. Just like any other media outlet today, including American ones, you can't trust everything that they say, but I did check on all the data he was talking about there. And Rick's an American, but on the other hand, you got to check the data, no matter what outlet you're looking at when you're talking about corporate media and everything. And David, Rick pointed out something that I wasn't aware of, is that Ukraine is importing oil from India, or diesel fuel in this case, from India, which means they're getting theirs from Russia too. It is an amazing the energy complexity, the imports, exports, production, and distribution on the European continent and now into Asia are dramatically greater. The complexities are greater than World War II. Obviously, we have a lot more electronics, machinery moving around using that type of energy, so we need more of it. But it just boggles my mind. And he was talking about Peter Navarro this weekend. Over the weekend, was raging about how the peace goes through, the road to peace goes through India, and I think he's right. But how do you solve that?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you one thing that will blow your mind even more. Russia continued selling oil to Ukraine after the war began for at least a year. And it was directly, so they were directly, Ukraine was paying money to Russia to buy their gas to help fuel their war effort against, to kill Russian troops. So, it's very complicated. The EU, of course, it was brought up, I think, during the campaign that the EU was, buying more Russian energy than they, in terms of, billions of dollars than they were sending aid to Ukraine, per year. So it is very complicated. But I love Peter Navarro, but he's dead wrong. The idea that he can, Trump can use secondary sanctions to try to push India, punish India for trading with Russia. I mean, India and Russia have, a lot of people don't understand this. They've been allies since 1971. They signed a friendship treaty. India signed a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union in 71, and they've been close military allies ever since. I mean, as Trump has pointed out, most of India's military arsenal is Russian built. They have high-tech Russian fighters. They have former Soviet aircraft carriers. I mean, right down the line, there's not a lot of U.S. weapons in the Indian armed forces. And, unfortunately, what this has done, these 50% Trump tariffs have pushed India into China's arms. They were already in Russia's arms. Now they're in China's arms, too. You saw the photos with Modi, Putin, and Xi clasping hands, in unity against the U.S.-led liberal international order. And what we're seeing right now is a military alliance that's far more powerful than our own. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, but in every respect, in terms of nuclear, arsenals, super EMP weapons, cyber offensive capabilities, military industrial production. I mean, China alone has, according to my calculations, they have a defense industrial base at least 3.8 times larger than our own in terms of purchase power parity. could build more, advanced weapons 5 to 6 times faster than us. Ships 232 times faster than us, as we learned from the top secret leaked report from a couple of years ago. And so, other than aggregate economic power, they overmatch us in every way. And so the key, what I've been saying since 2000 is that the key focus of U.S. national security strategy should be to break up the Sino-Russian alliance. I mean, Russia and China have been formally allied since 2001 with their Treaty of Friendship and Mutual Cooperation in July of that year. And, just before September 11th, the Bush administration was going to try to, do something to break that up. And then the war on terror happened, and we just threw that out the window. Trump, to his credit, had brought that back to the forefront during the campaign and said he was going to, try to break up the alliance. And, after some really great efforts, the first few months of the administration, that's really broke down. He's pursued policies that have served to bring them together. He's essentially made a deal with Ukraine to sell them 3,550 ERAM missiles that have ranges up to 400 kilometers. So it's 450 kilometers, so about 270 miles, that could, reach Moscow Oblast from Ukrainian territory. So he's proceeding to escalate the war. He's been talking about having some kind of no-fly zone, after a ceasefire is signed, where the U.S. would provide combat aircraft, command and control, intelligence to NATO peacekeepers on the ground. These are sowing the seeds of World War III, and given that I think the fact that we fought and won a nuclear war during World War II makes some people think we can do it again. I just don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of the Elmendorf Air Force Base talks, it seemed like we had taken another step forward towards peace, and the Russians appeared to agree. And I don't doubt that President Putin and his team that were there said these things to President Trump and the team. They appeared to agree to some type of security guarantees, but it was unspecified. It was never really specified. That included some Article 5-like guarantees. But again, that was very unspecified. And essentially, Russia was saying, hey, we'll stabilize the lines in the southwest part of those two oblasts and give the territory back, some of that territory back that Ukraine is on now, and stabilize those lines. And the only thing they asked for was this little part of the extension up in Donetsk up there. Unfortunately, that's like the Ukrainians' fortress of everywhere, fortress of everything that they built up there. But the Russians, they continue to, I mean, it may just be a kilometer a day or smaller. They continue to take territory and take ground, and the Ukrainians are not. Number one, and the Russians are launching some massive airstrikes, and it doesn't surprise me a bit. And of course, they did say they wouldn't accept any European troops on any security guarantee force. And we were talking about that before the talks. That said, and I actually said, I would guess that India and some other third-party nations' militaries would have to be involved in that. India's got a large enough force to be able to provide that kind of stuff. And then other third-party countries that are not European would have to be involved in that. And we were right. Why are the experts continuing to be wrong? I mean, they just continue to be wrong, the so-called experts.
Well, the experts, unfortunately, a lot of the 3- and 4-star generals on Fox News and other establishment, networks have been consistently wrong. They after predicting that Russia would take Kyiv in 3 days and Ukraine would surrender in 3 weeks, they did a 180. We saw, Keith Kellogg, Lieutenant General Kellogg retired, and then, of course, General Jack Keane, both predicted that Russia's defeat was imminent. General Milley as well. And then they flipped and said that Ukraine can win this one if we just send them, a few more weapon systems, maybe F-16s, maybe M1s, Bradleys, long-range missiles. Of course, we've literally sent them everything, every spare weapon we had in our arsenal, not just the U.S., but all 30 of our European NATO allies as well, and then some. We're the cupboard is not only bare, it's we're getting to the bone in terms of giving weapons to Ukraine that we can't afford to lose because we need them to deter Chinese aggression in the Western Pacific. So it's very counterproductive. Russia's 35 times larger than Ukraine. It's got 5 times more people. It's the premier, world premier tank power, nuclear power. It's got everything they need to defeat Ukraine. And as World War II showed, all it would take would be a couple nukes, TAC nukes that they fire off at Ukraine, and Zelensky would surrender within days, inside a week, because a nuclear war fought against a non-nuclear power. No one that I've talked to thinks that the U.S. would respond in kind. That we wouldn't even respond with direct military strikes. So they have that in their back pocket, but we just need to face reality. Trump was right all along. We could end this war in a day. The problem is Russia's made massive concessions in terms of their terms, in terms of giving up 2/3 of their territorial demands. Donetsk is just 1.1% of Ukraine's territory, actually less. And yes, as you said, it's prime real estate. It's a fortified belt territory, but again, 1%. Russia. A lot of people don't realize Russia has the armored forces to outflank that line at any time. One northern offensive in Sumy or Kharkiv, or even the Kyiv region or Chernihiv, and that force in Donbass would have to beat a Dunkirk-style retreat across the Dnipro to help defend Kyiv, because Ukraine doesn't have the troops. They've lost 2 million casualties versus about 300,000 to Russia, and that's just not sustainable. Russia is winning the war of attrition by every standard, in a really outstanding way in terms of Russian military strategy and forces. On the other hand, if you look at the territorial map, they've conquered almost nothing. They've conquered 1% of Ukraine's territory in 3 years of fighting. So they withdrew from 30% of Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine right before the Istanbul Agreement was to be signed, under the misguided belief that the war would be over, because that April 9th, 2022 was to signify a permanent ceasefire. And then when Zelensky didn't show up in Istanbul to sign it, I think Putin didn't know what to do, and he kind of hung out for a while and decided to mobilize the army. And now they have 2-to-1 superiority and 5-to-1 local superiority along in terms of troop quantities along most sections of the main front line.
Amazing. Well, we got to take another break. When we come back, I want to dive into this economic group, the SCO group, that's meeting right now. As a matter of fact, you'll see a video of it in the next 2 segments. This is it's very interesting. Very interesting that this is happening today on the anniversary of the signing of the surrender agreement by the Japanese at the end of World War II. Right back with David Pine.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet, and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor, and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
Fourth, We uphold fairness and justice, promote a correct understanding of World War II history, and oppose Cold War thinking, block confrontation, and acts of bullying. We safeguard the international system with the United Nations at its core, support the multilateral trading system centered on the World Trade Organization. We should advocate for equal and orderly multipolarization of the world, inclusive economic globalization, and promote the construction of a more just and equitable global governance system. We should work to build a more just and reasonable global governance system.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. That was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, President Xi of the Chinese Communist Party in the People's Republic of China speaking, talking about how they want a better global governance system that equalizes multipolarity and uses the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, all mechanisms and institutions that oppose Americans. I didn't say America, but Americans. They oppose our freedoms, they oppose our prosperity, and they oppose our obstinance to maintain that freedom all around the world when we see it as necessary to protect ourselves. They oppose every single one of those, and two of those institutions are institutions created by us, would never have been created without the United States post-World War II and that liberal world order that is now in tatters. And you go find evidence nowhere else as good than to see at the SCO, the head of the Chinese Communist Party saying how great they are and that we need to use those as the core of a new global system of governance. My guest today is David Pine, a U.S. Army veteran, planner, a strategist, has supervised weapons agreements, cooperation agreements in the Cold War, especially with Russia, the Soviet Union, the the African continent, and understands the geopolitical situation very, very well. David, I had to show that because of what Xi said. Those items really are appalling to MAGA and the America First movement, aren't they?
Well, they are. And Russia and China have been arguing for a multipolar world since 1997, back during the Primakov days when Primakov, former KGB director, was a prime minister of the Russian Federation. That was in, Russia and China and India were already forming their own bloc, an Eastern bloc against the U.S. And NATO way back then. It was all, 28 years ago. And the reason was because President Clinton, Bill Clinton, insisted on expanding NATO to Russia's borders in Eastern Europe. That was something that was a huge mistake. There were tons of, his own defense secretary was threatened to resign over that move. And that's what, that was kind of the beginning of what brought us into conflict with Russia, erasing the whole understanding, everything that was agreed to as part of the reunification agreement of Germany in 1990 with the Soviet Union. And so it's been all downhill from there, trying to push NATO into Ukraine. Obviously, NATO is in Ukraine, even though it's not a formal member state. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We have these three powers, three of the greatest powers, all nuclear powers in the world are united together. North Korea is part of that alliance, informally, of course. They are not a member state. They're not an observer state like Turkey and other countries. But Iran is part of that alliance, and Iran's president was there as well. So that what we're going to see tomorrow is a military parade, probably the largest we've seen in years, that China is hosting in Beijing, and they're going to have 20 leaders of countries, mostly oppositional to the U.S., but also a former Japanese prime minister, South Korea's parliament speaker. No representatives from Germany and Italy, but there's the Slovakian president, is going to be there, Fico, and maybe a representative from Hungary as well. Actually, no, not Hungary. It's the Serbian president.
Yeah.
So this is essentially, it's an alliance. It's economic, it's military, it's technological, and it's been forming. I've been worrying about the Sino-Russian alliance at the top of my lungs since really since the late 90s, but it didn't really formalize till 2001. And it wasn't until Putin and Xi announced their no limits partnership in February of 2022 at the Beijing Olympics that everyone started to realize, hey, this is real. This is a real threat, and it's really a nightmare for the U.S. in terms of they have all the capabilities to counter and even destroy us in a matter of minutes.
You know what really got my attention with that agreement is the agreement to move oil from Russia to China overland and open that overland and solidify the overland logistics route because the U.S. Navy's not going to touch it. It's too deep inside a territory for the U.S. Air Force or for the U.S. Navy Air Forces or Marine Air Forces to be able to easily target that. And that is critically important. And that's the moment when I said, we have got to speak out to get the leadership of the United States to pull Russia away from this agreement and put our arms back around them somehow. But the experts in the United States and the Atlantic Council and in Europe, Western Europe, all continue, even this morning, calling for stronger military force in Ukraine to sanction India, which I can't work it out in my mind how that's going to be effective. And then Peter Navarro, with all due respect to all these people, Peter Navarro is talking about the road to peace is through India. But here's the challenge. India, we don't do much trade with them from our direction to them. And what they do with us is like personnel type stuff, a lot of it, so I'm not sure that a sanction is going to work because the Indians will just get the oil through China overland.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Trump has done, he's been pressuring, he's been heeding the neocon call to put all the pressure and screws on Russia, and he's done nothing to pressure Zelensky. There was a 1 week cutoff of military aid. I don't even know if it's actually cut off, but that's what they announced. It was a temporary cutoff that lasted 7 days from March 4th to March 11th of U.S. military aid and offensive intelligence. And other than that, I mean, he's been going all out. He's been fighting Biden's war like crazy. He denouncing it as Biden's war, but then for some reason, after saying he would end it, he continues to escalate it. And I mean, the escalation on the U.S. end, with these ERAM missiles, is much far. It's much more than anything Biden ever done. So it's pushing us closer to World War III. It's pushing Russia closer to China. And the sad part is, I really believe that we got 80 to 90% there when during the Trump-Putin summit. They had a framework deal. That was almost ready to sign. And then, Rubio and EU leaders and Zelensky said, hey, you can't sign anything without Ukraine. We're the United States of America. Ukraine is a U.S. military protector. We can sign whatever the heck they want. We want to, Trump wants to, as our president, and tell them to pound, tell them Zelensky to sign on the dotted line, or else we're going to cut off all aid and pull out of the war. So there's, Trump needs to turn the screws on Zelensky. There's no other way to end the war. Putin's ready. Yeah. He's made major concessions. He's apparently agrees to allow Ukraine to have a large military with a massive amount of weapons, and we're just letting that deal go by.
Yeah, I got to think that Rubio and Witkoff are working in the background trying to get this thing back together. I mean, it's happened before. I have a lot of confidence in President Trump's ability in this kind of situation. We've got a hand up in the audience. Let's go ahead and take that before we get to our last break. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. Mr. Pine, it's a pleasure. As I'm sure you know, the fourth plenary meeting of the CCP is scheduled for October of this year. Given the fact that there has been other agreements made in the past. However, is it possible for this recent SCO conduct to be pushed aside, given the possibility that Xi Jinping himself may not survive the plenary meeting? Xi's own predecessor was stuffed and cuffed in the past, right in front of the cameras and everything. So what are the realities in that, if you have an opinion? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think Xi Jinping, obviously, he is president for life. He's dictator for life. He, took the reins as dictator for life at the, I think it was the 2022 Communist Party meeting. And that's, he's been firing allies. I mean, he's been taking out, his own defense minister has disappeared. A lot of generals have been disappeared that are, his own allies. So he's kind of like Stalin at this point. He's purging the military, but he's putting even more hardliners in line, because what I've been hearing is that the generals he's been purging are the ones that are a little bit skittish about pushing the nuclear button against the U.S. So he wants generals that are ready to nuke the U.S. on command, are willing to invade Taiwan, even if they expect a massive U.S. response. So I don't see Xi Jinping going anywhere. He's there to stay. I have, Rob and I have friends that talk about regime change in China. That's simply never going to happen. The only way it could happen is if there was a nuclear war and China was on the losing end, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's a fool's errand for the West, led by the U.S. to try to do a regime change. Either kinetically or non-kinetically, with a color revolution. The CCP is just too well embedded. Although I'm sure there are millions and millions and millions of ministers in that country, it would have to come from them, just like what we're calling for in Iran. Well, we got to take our last break, Dave. When we come back, I want to talk about Turkey and NATO and Erdogan and see if Pakistan is attending this SCO thing. That would be interesting. I didn't see them on the list, but I thought I heard that they were. We'll be right back with David Pine.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
He's actually making the case for the countries that are here in China who are literally turning their backs on the West. Because as Mr. Navarro has proven, the West has turned their backs on them. So they're saying, okay, two can play this game, right? So what would happen if suddenly we start to see the disintegration of this hegemony? What if suddenly, for example, we start seeing NATO countries decide to come over to this summit, right? Well, guess what? It's happening. Guess who's here at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit? And he's expressing a desire for full membership in the summit. Turkey. Turkey is a NATO country. And it's now here rubbing elbows with Mr. Navarro's proclaimed enemies.
Tuesday, and we're learning a lot in the context of the anniversary of the end of World War II and the complexities of the economic and geopolitical situation at the beginning of that conflict, and comparison of that and where the world is today, much to our own doing of these creation of these liberal world order institutions, that many of which have now been turned against Americans first, policies and are insisting that Americans not be able to prioritize themselves with our own government. That's the real core issue that's going on here. And the SCO summit there is meeting this week during this anniversary. And my guest today is David Pine, U.S. Army veteran, strategic planner, supervised weapons cooperation agreements with the Soviet Union on the continent of Africa, and continues as the head of the National Security and Homeland Security Task Force. And David, Turkey has always been an outlier. I have even asked the question publicly, why are they a member of NATO? Erdogan has turned the country from a secular country where I have many friends serving in the military. I went to Navy War College with a great Turkish family that we hear nothing from now, because Erdogan has since turned the country into a theocracy that's leaning towards Islamism with a strategic outlook of establishing what some are calling the Neo-Ottoman, reestablishing the Ottoman Empire, and Neo-Ottoman Empire is what they're calling it these days. Why would Turkey be at the SCO summit asking for membership?
Well, as you stated, Erdogan is an Islamist. He was the head of the Islamist party when he took power in 2002. That was all part of Bush's democratization initiative, where he kind of pressured our Turkish allies, who were all secular, kind of a secular military-led country that was strongly allied with us and very reliable, to switch to the Islamist side, and that was. Turkey was just one of 4 countries that Bush helped to deliver to the Islamist ledger, and that was very unfortunate. Of course, Obama, he did a similar effort in 2009, but Turkey under Erdogan has been aligning increasingly with Russia and China, despite helping Ukraine during with the Russo-Ukrainian war. Of course, he hosted the Istanbul Agreement. He would try to get Putin and Zelensky to sign the dotted line, and that was unsuccessful. There's been meetings in Istanbul since. So he's working with Russia. Turkey shot down a Russian aircraft, and Russia didn't do anything about it because they have such good relations. But Turkey has been trying to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization for many years. I think probably at least 8. And in answer to your other question about Pakistan, Pakistan has been an SCO member along with India since 2017. So they definitely were at the summit as well. But I've kind of mulled the same question: why is Turkey a NATO member state, despite the fact they have the second largest military and are critical in terms of potential deterrence? They're playing footsie with the other side, and the SCO, that's not just an economic organization. That's the enemy alliance. President Putin rightly described the SCO as the reborn Warsaw Pact. So we've seen joint military exercises, SCO exercises between Russia and China. India has been involved in those. They've been land, sea, and air. They've been nuclear warfighting exercises, all aimed against the United States. If Turkey wants to, be a member of the enemy military alliance, we might want to preempt them and kick them out of NATO tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to prompt that so that they can save face and say, well, see, the West has kicked us out. That would have dramatic economic impact leading into Europe and then down throughout the Middle East, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, it'd be a major issue. Of course, there was that S-400, missile defense system that we tried to press them not to buy, and they refused. They bought it anyway. So we had to limit our advanced F-35 or F-22 shipments to them. The world is realigning. I think, Turkey and other countries that we might not think would be aligning with Russia and China kind of see the writing on the wall. Even though we're nominally, the world's under a liberal kind of U.S.-led rules-based order, the balance of power is on the other side. So what this is, there's 2 possibilities here. We either accommodate that balance of power, either by dividing the Sino-Russian alliance and then aligning with Russia kind of loosely against China, or we get into a war situation where, they overturn the international order by force, and that war is likely to go nuclear.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about Pakistan is that you mentioned earlier that all the world's nuclear powers, other than a few, are in this organization, and Pakistan is a nuclear power also. So all of the nuclear powers, besides the United States, France, and I guess the UK is still a nuclear power, although we're maintaining their warheads. Everything is all dependent on us. Other than those three Western nations, the rest of the world's nuclear power nations are in the SCO. I have that correctly?
That's correct. So yeah, there's 10 official nuclear powers in the world. 6 of them are part of the SCO. If you count North Korea, actually it's 5. So 5 plus North Korea. And then I think Iran is nuclear as well. So that's actually, I think I have that wrong. I think there's 9 official nuclear powers, and I count Iran as a potential nuclear power. So essentially there's 3. There's, NATO is a 3 nuclear power alliance. There's the US, UK, and France, and then Israel, of course, aligned with us. So it's essentially 4 against 6.
Yeah. All weapons assigned to NATO belong to the United States. I mean, France and England are part of NATO, but, I don't really consider NATO to be a nuclear power itself as an entity because of all the issues, especially with Macron, and the French are constantly wishy-washy and around about that. So my point with that question about Pakistan was to highlight that they are in this nuclear club, and to ask you what you think about this. I hear a lot. The Chinese haven't achieved parity with us and don't outnumber us in nuclear forces, which is true. They're relatively small compared to the United States and compared to Russia. But when you combine all of those forces from those countries together, that's a significant difference and highlights why people like you and I keep saying we've got to do the things to peel Russia out of that agreement with the Chinese communists.
We absolutely do. And I'm definitely an outliner, but I think that Russia, Ukraine, the Ministry of Defense, there was a leaked classified report on their end that showed that Russia had 16,000 nuclear weapons, of which 6,000 are strategic. We only have 2,285 operational strategic nuclear weapons. If they have 6,000, that's 2.5 plus to 1 strategically. And then, of course, tactical nukes, we have maybe 200 total in terms of deployed and undeployed operational tactical nuclear weapons. So we're completely outmoded vastly just by Russia alone. But really, if we pull Russia out of the alliance, then we don't have to worry about, pacing ourselves against Russia. We can focus on China. What I've seen is that China likely has double the nukes that we have right now in terms of operational nukes, right around there, 4,000, 5,000, much higher than what has been reported by U.S. intelligence. U.S. intelligence has been dead wrong about the Chinese nuclear arsenal from the beginning. They've been arguing it's 4 times lower than what my sources are saying it is. So, I think we're infiltrated. U.S. intelligence is infiltrated by pro-Chinese agents that are trying to underplay the threat that they pose to us. And it's much greater. I mean, I don't think we can overestimate the threat that we face from China, let alone China and Russia combined.
Yeah, and I want to end with this. You just brought it up. The information warfare that's occurring both from nation states, media entities, and just citizens. There is a vast information war globally going on, and you highlighted one just now, the issue with the Chinese nuclear capability being larger than what our intelligence services are saying. Here's a second one that really just eats at me, and that is that our intelligence services are saying the Russians are getting their young men killed at much greater rates than the Ukrainians have, when common sense tells us that that's not accurate, and it's supported by the leak of the intelligence by the National Guard airmen that leaked those slides a few years ago. He was wrong to do it. He got punished for it, as rightly so. But we know that information is wrong, but they've convinced the president that it's accurate. That doesn't help us in our attempt to try to get a peace deal done when the president and his team are trying to operate in good faith, does it? And I'll let you have the last word on that.
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't. U.S. intelligence has been consistently wrong about almost everything since Pearl Harbor. So we have a horrible record. We got the invasion right in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They were predicting that almost to the week. That's the whole issue. Is Trump keeps getting fed the wrong information. How is he supposed to make the right decisions if he keeps getting fed wrong information that Russia's losing generations, and in fact it's the opposite. The interesting thing is, I think it was back in January, he actually quoted the exact estimates that I've been reporting in terms of Ukrainian war dead, but he overstated the Russian war dead. So he's clearly being behind the scenes. He is getting accurate reports of the exact Ukrainian war dead that Ukraine is providing to us. But then U.S. intelligence is also accepting Ukrainian estimates of exaggerations of the number of troops that Russia's losing. So he's being, behind the scenes, he's getting the right information on Ukrainian casualties, but the wrong information on Russian casualties. And, that's making him think that he's got Putin, he's able to turn the screws on Putin when, in fact, Russia can keep fighting this war indefinitely and until there's no Ukrainian men left to fight. And, we're seeing that the desertion rate, in terms of the reductions in the size of the Ukrainian army, I've calculated it's between 19,000, 24,000 a month in terms of killed, severely wounded, and desertions. So the Ukrainian army continues to get smaller. The Russian army keeps getting larger. All it's going to take is Russian invasion of Kyiv from Belarus later this month during the Zapad 2025 joint military exercise between Russia and Belarus. NATO's estimating 150,000 Russian troops are going to show up. If that happens, it's game over for Zelensky.
And it doesn't have to happen, David. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great show, and we'll have to leave it on that note. Tomorrow's Whistleblower Wednesday. My special guest is the governor candidate for Texas, Lieutenant Colonel, retired U.S. Army Special Forces, Dr. Pete Chambers. And it's going to be a great show. I'll see you then on Whistleblower Wednesday.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mission for Freedom. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are live, as always, on WorldViewTube. You can watch us on WorldViewTube.com or just install the app, WorldViewTube, and you can watch us there. We're also live on X, America News X account. We're live